Pass the papers to Naomi, my stepmother said into the microphone, smiling so brightly you would have thought she was announcing a toast instead of an ambush. Let her sign first, then we can all celebrate properly. A notary stood beside the cake table. My half-sister was holding out my father's silver fountain pen, and every face in that backyard turned toward me at once. My name is Naomi Carter. I was 38 years old then, and I worked as a senior mortgage servicing analyst for a small private lender in Columbus. I read deeds, liens, transfers, and payoff statements for a living, which meant I recognized predatory paperwork almost as fast as I recognized my own family, pretending not to be predatory at all. Welcome back to Closest Strangers, stories of family betrayal, quiet justice, and the people who were supposed to love you. If you've ever been the responsible one, the ATM, the fixer, the strong one, this story is for you. The first thing you should know is that houses make people sentimental in public and greedy in private. The second thing you should know is that my family had been training me for that moment for almost 12 years. My father bought the house on Eldridge Avenue when I was 13. It wasn't large, and nobody outside our block would have called it impressive. It was a brick two-story with a sagging porch, a fig tree out back that never grew fruit, and a front door my mother painted navy every third summer because she said blue made a home look honest. When my mother died, I was 22. I had just finished community college and was working reception at a physical therapy clinic while trying to decide whether I could afford to go back for my bachelor's degree. My father did not grieve well. He folded into himself. He still went to work, still paid bills, still nodded at neighbors, but a softness went out of the house after my mother passed. Her teacups stayed exactly where she left them. Her scarf hung on the peg behind the mudroom door until winter ended and summer began and winter came again. A year and a half later, my father married Denise. Denise was pretty in the way some women sharpen prettiness into strategy. Her hair was always smooth, her lipstick never moved. She laughed a half-second too late, just enough to show she was deciding whether something served her before she reacted to it. She had a daughter named Kiara, who was 19 at the time, all gloss and confidence and beautiful carelessness. Kiara walked into rooms as if somebody had promised her the best chair long before she arrived. I was 24 then, old enough to know when I wasn't welcome, young enough to keep proving myself anyway. At first, Denise called me our dependable Naomi in front of people. It sounded affectionate until you realized it always came before a request. Could I pick Kiara up from campus because Denise had a headache? Could I spot them $640 because Denise's old landlord still hadn't mailed her deposit? Could I cover the electric bill just this month because there had been confusion with Denise's account? Could I keep an eye on Dad's medication list because you're just so much better with details than we are? Every favor had a compliment attached to it, like a ribbon on a brick. My father saw pieces of it, but not enough, or maybe enough, and he did what tired men sometimes do when peace feels expensive. He let the capable daughter absorb the cost. By the time I was 27, I had moved back into the house after my apartment lease ended. The plan was temporary. My father's blood pressure had become harder to control, and Denise did not like appointments, pill charts, or dealing with insurance calls. I told myself I was being practical. Save money, help Dad, finish school online, stay 1 year. 1 year became 4. In that time, I completed my degree part-time and moved from receptionist to loan processor, then processor to analyst. I paid off my student balance. I replaced the water heater for $1,480 when it burst in January. I paid $3,225 toward roof repairs after a storm because my father's deductible was too high. I covered a tax shortage one spring, $2,913, because an escrow review had been mishandled and the county deadline was 10 days away. I kept every receipt in a navy accordion binder with white tabs: roof, taxes, utilities, medical, repairs. That binder would matter later. Kiara, meanwhile, became the golden child in the way some families assign roles without ever admitting they've done it. She was free-spirited. She was finding herself. If she missed a payment, she was overwhelmed. If I noticed the payment before the lights got cut off, I was stern. If she borrowed money and forgot it, she was embarrassed. If I asked for it back, I was counting. I learned the family math quickly. My $400 loan to Kiara in 2016 was nothing between sisters. Her $400 never returned was not worth making things weird. My 12-hour day followed by grocery shopping for the house was what Naomi is good at. Her posting photos from brunch while I carried my father's oxygen tank was, you know how young people are. The quote Denise loved most was this: "Family doesn't keep score." It sounded noble coming out of her mouth. It sounded like theft everywhere else. Still, life moved. It always does. My father's health worsened in slow, ordinary ways that are somehow harder than dramatic ones. He did not collapse all at once. He shrank by inches. One more pill, one more specialist, one more afternoon asleep in the recliner with the television murmuring to no one. He became embarrassed by needing help with small things, buttoning a cuff, remembering which inhaler belonged to mornings and which to nights, standing long enough to shave. Denise was attentive when other people were watching. She posted about gratitude. She made casseroles for church functions. She told anyone who asked that caring for a sick husband was the hardest blessing. At home, she delegated. "Naomi, can you run Dad's labs? Naomi, can you call the billing department? Naomi, can you sit with him Saturday? Kiara and I already paid for the hair appointment and brunch." When Dad was awake enough to notice, he apologized. "You do too much," he would say. And every time I made the mistake of answering honestly, then tell them to do more. He would sigh and look toward the kitchen where Denise's laughter usually floated in from a phone speaker. "It's complicated," he'd say. That was my father's other favorite sentence. It meant yes, but softer. The seed of everything came during the second year, after his first hospitalization. I had just come home from work and found him at the dining room table with papers spread out in front of him. Not bills, not medical forms, county records, mortgage statements, property tax copies. There was a manila folder beside his elbow and his reading glasses halfway down his nose. Denise and Kiara were out at a baby shower. "What's all this?" I asked. He rested a hand over the papers. "House stuff." House stuff is what people say when they know they should have handled something earlier. I sat down across from him. "What house stuff?" He pushed the stack toward me. "The mortgage had 2 late fees I don't understand. The insurance renewal is too high. Denise keeps saying we should refinance and put some of the value to work. Kiara says a kitchen upgrade would help if we ever sold. I don't like the way they talk about this place." There was something in his voice I had not heard in a while. Fear, not fear of death, not even fear of losing control. It was something smaller and sadder, fear of becoming removable. I read through the statements. There were no serious issues. The remaining balance was manageable. What worried me was the conversation happening around him. Denise wanted liquidity. Kiara wanted a better setup. Both phrases were code for turning a paid-down family home into cash they could touch. "You don't need a refinance," I said. "You need a plan." He looked at me for a long moment. "Would you help me make one?" That was how I met Mr. Harold Bell. He'd been my parents' attorney years earlier when my mother drafted her will. By then, he was in his 70s, thin, careful, and patient, in the way only people with no need to impress anyone become. His office smelled like old paper and peppermint. Dad and I met him on a wet Thursday afternoon in March. Denise did not come because she said legal offices made her anxious. Kiara did not come because she had content work, which was what she called posting affiliate links online. Mr. Bell asked direct questions. Who had been paying what? What was Dad's intention for the house? Did he want Denise secure in residence? Did he want the property preserved? Did he understand the difference between occupancy, ownership, and transfer? I answered some. Dad answered the important ones. Yes, Denise should be secure while I'm alive. Yes, Naomi has put money into the house. No, I do not want pressure put on the property. Yes, I want the house protected. And then, with both hands folded on his desk, he said the sentence that changed my life. I would like Naomi added to title as joint tenant with rights of survivorship, and I would like documentation of her financial contributions kept with my records. I looked at him. He did not look back immediately. He kept watching Mr. Bell. The old attorney nodded once. That can be done. On the drive home, rain ticking softly against the windshield, my father finally turned to me and said, "I'm not rewarding you. I'm acknowledging reality." I didn't know I had been holding my breath until then. "You don't owe me that," I said. He looked tired. "Maybe not, but I owe you honesty. If I leave everything loose, they will turn this house into a prize. You never treated it like a prize." That is the kind of thing daughters remember forever, because it is so rare for the truth to arrive before the funeral. The transfer was recorded 2 weeks later. Nothing flashy, no announcement, no dramatic reading, just paper, stamps, signatures, filing. The mortgage stayed as it was. The taxes stayed as they were. Life stayed as it was, too. Except now I kept a second folder in my closet. County copies, certified record, attorney notes, proof of my contributions, and a handwritten page from my father that listed every major house repair I had covered since 2014. Denise found out 6 months later by accident. A tax notice came while I was at work. She opened it because she opened everything if she thought it might matter. When I got home, she was waiting at the kitchen island with the envelope in front of her like a prosecutor. "What is this?" she asked. My father was at the table, silent. I set down my bag. "A property notice." "Don't be smart. Why is your name on this house?" "Because he put it there," I almost said. Instead, I asked the more useful question. "Did Dad not tell you?" Denise's face changed then, not into grief, not into confusion, into injury, the kind calculated to make a witness feel guilty. "You let me find out like this?" she asked my father. He rubbed his forehead. "It was my decision." Kiara came down the stairs halfway through the argument and made it worse immediately. "That's insane," she said. "Naomi already acts like she runs everything." I remember laughing then once, not because anything was funny, because sometimes contempt leaves your body that way. Denise cried. She said she felt blindsided. She said marriage meant trust. She said it looked terrible. She asked what people would think if something happened to my father, and it looked like she was at the mercy of his daughter. My father answered in a weak voice that still managed to land. "The problem is not what people would think. The problem is what you would do." The room went still after that. He rarely spoke that plainly. Denise did not forgive him. She did what many offended people do when they cannot reverse a decision. She changed the weather around it. For the next 3 years, everything became a subtle referendum on my place in the family. At church events, Denise introduced me as our financial expert, a phrase that made people smile and ask me budgeting questions, while she stood back, aggrieved and dignified. At Thanksgiving, she joked that I should carve the turkey since Naomi already owns the house. Laughter. Forks. My father staring at his plate. At Kiara's 26th birthday dinner, Kiara lifted her wine glass and said, "To family assets being equitably shared someday." Again, laughter. Public humiliation is most powerful when dressed as humor. It lets cowards hurt you with witnesses and call your reaction the problem. I stopped attending things unless my father specifically asked. By then, his health was failing faster. The last year of his life narrowed everything. Appointments multiplied. I reduced my hours for a while and worked remotely more often. I handled medication refills, insurance appeals, the wheelchair ramp estimate, the bathroom grab bar installation, and the final hospice paperwork when it came to that. Denise took photos of casseroles. Kiara cried loudly and disappeared for long stretches. When my father died, I was the one who found the binder on his desk marked important. Inside were the things I already knew, and 3 I did not. The first was a letter to me. The second was a signed statement about the house, witnessed and dated, saying clearly that he had added me to title intentionally because I had maintained the property, managed his affairs faithfully, and protected the home from pressure. The third was a smaller envelope with one sentence written on the outside in his uneven hand. For Naomi, when "it's just a formality" comes back around. Inside was the silver fountain pen he had used for every serious signature after my mother died. I sat on his side of the bed and cried so quietly, even I almost did not hear myself. The funeral passed the way funerals often do: casseroles, flowers, stories, theater. Denise wept beautifully. Kiara clung to people. I answered practical questions, signed paperwork, and paid the cemetery balance when the funeral home discovered a discrepancy of $1,116 that nobody else seemed equipped to resolve. After the third week, the real campaign began. It started with softness. Denise said she wanted clarity. Kiara said everyone was grieving and no one should make hard boundaries too quickly. Then came numbers. Denise believed the house should be shared fairly. Kiara believed my name being on title did not mean the moral picture was simple. Then came pressure disguised as compromise. What if I signed a document confirming I had no intention of forcing a sale? What if we reworked ownership for peace? What if I let Kiara's name be added to show good faith? What if we all met with a mediator from church? What if I remembered family? There is a special kind of exhaustion that comes from defending yourself against people who need your labor, but resent your leverage. For a while, I tried to be reasonable. I paid my share of utilities and then some. I said Denise could stay in the house while we sorted future arrangements. I did not mention that legally because of the survivorship structure. The property had passed fully to me outside probate. I did not mention I had met privately with Mr. Bell after the funeral and understood my rights clearly. I did not mention that I was giving them time, not asking for it. Reasonableness did not make them kinder. It made them bolder. Kiara started hosting more things at the house. Friends over on Fridays, brunch on Sundays, a healing dinner 1 month after the funeral, a birthday gathering for one of her friends. She moved as if possession were a mood rather than a fact. She once told someone in the kitchen, with me standing 3 feet away, "We're just waiting for the paperwork to be cleaned up." I began keeping notes: dates, times, comments, requests, photos of extra cars on the lawn, screenshots of texts, copies of utility spikes. I was not building a revenge file then. I was building reality, because families like mine survive by making the reliable person sound dramatic. The first major reveal came 8 months after Dad died. Denise asked if we could all sit down like adults. Her voice over the phone was syrupy. Kiara would be there too. So would Pastor Glenn from their church, because Denise felt a spiritual perspective would help. I almost declined. Then I remembered my father's envelope. When I arrived, the dining table was set with coffee mugs and a yellow legal pad. Pastor Glenn was a gentle man with tired eyes who looked alarmed to be there before anyone even spoke. Denise opened with prayer. Kiara sniffled twice without tears. And then Denise launched into a speech about fairness, sacrifice, marriage, and the pain of uncertainty. Finally, she slid a printed document toward me. It was not a deed transfer, not yet. It was an informal family memorandum stating that all parties acknowledged the house as a shared family asset and intended to pursue equitable retitling at a later date. Meaning, sign away the clean legal reality and replace it with emotional fog. I read every line, then turned it over. "No," I said. Kiara huffed. "You didn't even think about it." "I did," I said. "That's why I read it." Denise leaned back. "Naomi, nobody is trying to take anything from you." That sentence always comes before someone tries. Pastor Glenn cleared his throat softly. "Perhaps there's a middle way here." I opened my folder and set 3 copies on the table. County record, Dad's statement, contribution summary. The room changed immediately, not emotionally, structurally. 1 minute, it was a guilt session. The next, it was evidence. Pastor Glenn read in silence. Denise stared at my father's signed statement. and then at me, as if I had manufactured the dead. Kiara said, "That was when he was sick." Mr. Bell, who had advised me to keep my answers short, would have been proud of the restraint it took not to say 10 different things at once. Instead, I said, "He signed it while represented, witnessed, and fully aware. And for the record, I am not discussing private legal matters as a family opinion exercise." Denise's mouth flattened. "You came prepared." "Yes," I said, "because you didn't invite me for coffee. You invited me to weaken my own position." That was the first time I saw Pastor Glenn look directly at Denise with disappointment instead of sympathy. If you've ever watched someone's strategy fail the moment documents enter the room, you know how revealing it is. Before proof, everything is about tone. After proof, tone suddenly stops mattering. If you're the person in your family who has had to keep receipts just to remain sane, pause here and tell me in the comments what role they cast you in: the difficult one, the cold one, the selfish one, or the strong one who was supposed to say yes forever. And if stories like this feel a little too familiar, subscribe. Around here, we tell the truth quietly, but we tell it all the way. That meeting should have ended the matter. Instead, it evolved. Denise and Kiara changed tactics from moral pressure to social pressure. They stopped asking me to retitle the house directly and started staging little performances for whoever might repeat their version better. At church brunches, Denise would sigh and say, "I never imagined becoming a widow and having to ask permission to feel secure." At birthdays, Kiara joked about how some people confuse paperwork with love. A cousin named Rochelle called me one evening to hear my side, which told me Denise had already provided hers. I gave Rochelle a neutral summary, and she was quiet for a long time before saying, "I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to repeat my name." People only say that when they are about to confirm exactly what you feared. 2 weeks before the funeral, Denise had apparently told Rochelle that the house would obviously be retitled because I understood my place. The plan, Rochelle said, was to transition everything once emotions settled. Denise had even joked that I might fuss for a month, but she always comes around. That sentence sat in my chest like a stone, not because it hurt, because it clarified. They had not misread me once in panic. They had studied me over years and reached a conclusion. I was the one who absorbed impact, the one who eventually cooperated, the one who hated scenes enough to lose quietly. Once you know the role people have assigned you, you can decide whether to keep performing it. The house itself became the battlefield. It was fully paid off 15 months after my father died because I chose to eliminate the remaining balance rather than keep any loose excuse available for future manipulation. I used savings, a small inheritance from my mother's side, and a year of disciplined living that included no vacations, no big purchases, and more frozen dinners than I care to remember. When the final lien release recorded, I kept that copy too. Around then, I asked Denise to meet me in the sunroom. She wore cream that day, as if neutral colors could soften selfishness. "I need a timeline," I told her, "for your long-term housing plan." She blinked. "My what?" "I have not pushed you. I have not embarrassed you. I have not asked for rent. But I am asking now what your long-term plan is." Her face hardened so fast it almost impressed me. "You'd put your father's widow out?" "No," I said. "I'm asking what your plan is." Kiara, who had clearly been listening from the hall, stepped in before Denise answered. "This is unbelievable," she said. "You act like you're some landlord." I looked at her. "No. I act like the person who has been paying for this property longer than you've been pretending it's yours." Denise put a hand dramatically over her chest. "This is why people say money changes people." And there it was again, that family, quote, machine finding a new line when the old one no longer worked. "No," I said. "Boundaries reveal people." She stood and walked out. Kiara followed. That night, I got 6 texts from relatives, 3 advising patients, 1 shaming me, 1 fishing for gossip, and 1, unexpectedly, from my father's sister, Aunt Evelyn. Do not let them make you feel guilty for ending a free arrangement they plan to make permanent, she wrote. Call me tomorrow. Aunt Evelyn had always been the quiet ally in the family, though I did not know it when I was younger. She was not dramatic enough to be considered important by people who only notice noise. But she watched, she remembered, and more critically, she had loved my mother before she loved anyone else in the house. The next morning, she invited me to lunch. Over tomato soup and half a sandwich, she told me something that completed the picture. 3 months before Dad died, Denise had asked her whether a widow could override prior title decisions if the daughter had manipulated an old man. Aunt Evelyn had shut the conversation down then, but she had not forgotten it. I didn't tell you before because your father was still alive and sick, she said. I didn't want more chaos, but you need to stop imagining this is just grief talking. This was planning. I felt strangely calm hearing that. Anger can be exhausting. Confirmation can be restful. Thank you, I said. Aunt Evelyn nodded. Your mother used to say the most dangerous people aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who practice their innocence. That line stayed with me. I gave Denise 90 days written notice after that. Not eviction, not punishment. A formal occupancy transition notice drafted with legal review, respectful and clear. It stated that I intended to occupy or repurpose the property and that current arrangements would end on a specific date. I offered a modest relocation stipend of $4,000, not because I owed it, but because closure is easier when it cannot be called cruelty. Denise called it heartless. Kiara called it war. I called it paper. The house grew colder after that. Denise stopped speaking to me directly unless someone else was present. Kiara's voice got louder on purpose. Doors closed harder. Little things began happening. Items moved from where I left them. A utility payment accidentally missed. My groceries shifted off shelves. A framed photo of me and my father disappearing from the hallway and reappearing face down in a drawer. The objective of people losing leverage is often to make coexistence so unpleasant that you offer concessions just to breathe. I did not. I moved my important records to a locked firebox at work. I installed a keyed lock on my bedroom door. I redirected all house-related mail. I paid every bill electronically and archived confirmations. I reduced what they could tamper with and increased what they could not deny. Then came the party. It was Kiara's engagement party, though at the time she called it a family announcement brunch. Her boyfriend, Devin, had proposed after 9 months. He seemed decent in a dim, apologetic way, the sort of man who senses trouble but hopes it will sort itself out if he smiles enough. Denise insisted the brunch happen at the house. I considered refusing. The occupancy end date was 3 weeks away. Tension was high, but part of me wanted to see what they would try when they were desperate. Desperate people stage things. 3 days before the event, Kiara texted me, "Please don't make anything weird on Sunday. It's about love and fresh starts." That alone would have been enough to warn me. Then came a second text from a cousin I trusted less, but not entirely. Heard Denise saying, "Sunday is the perfect moment to clear the house tension once and for all." Don't know what that means. And then, late Saturday night, I got the final gift, a misdirected email, not from Denise directly, from Kiara to a local notary named Marisol Vega. Attached, please find the quitclaim draft. We only need Naomi to sign and everything should be settled while everyone is there. My mom thinks the witnesses will make it smoother. Witnesses, not guests, witnesses. I stared at the screen so long my tea went cold. The attached draft named Denise and Kiara as grantees. My signature line was marked owner. They were going to use an engagement party to publicly corner me into signing away the house. Some people hear a plan like that and imagine rage. I felt something cleaner, completion. At last, the hidden thing was standing in the light. The next morning, I called Mr. Bell's office. He was mostly retired by then, but his junior associate, Lena Morales, had handled my transition notice documents and knew the file. I forwarded the email. She called within 10 minutes. "Do not sign anything," she said unnecessarily. "I wasn't planning to." "Good. Document everything. If they present the document, keep your response brief. If needed, you can say you've already initiated occupancy enforcement and title clarification steps, which you have. And Naomi? Yes? If they turn this into a spectacle, remember, you do not have to meet performance with performance. That was exactly what I needed. So I got dressed carefully. Navy dress, small gold hoops, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, the kind of face that gives people nowhere to hide their own behavior. I put 3 things in my tote. Dad's silver fountain pen, a copy of the recorded deed and lien release, a sealed envelope containing updated formal notices, final move-out reminder, reimbursement ledger, and a letter from counsel confirming any unauthorized attempt to induce transfer would be disputed and documented. Different ending. The backyard was decorated when I arrived. White umbrellas, catered trays, flowers in low glass bowls, a rented speaker, a table of desserts under a linen cloth, more people than I expected, which told me Denise had widened the audience on purpose. Kiara wore cream, like her mother. Devin looked sweaty. Denise hugged people with the shining eyes of a woman preparing her own triumph. For the first 40 minutes, nothing happened. There were mimosas, photos, a prayer. Devin thanked everyone for coming. Kiara cried prettily once. Denise moved through the crowd like a producer checking camera angles. Then she tapped a spoon to her glass. "You all know," she began, "how hard this last year has been on our family." I stood near the back, already tired. But you also know that healing requires unity, and sometimes unity requires putting the right things in the right names, with the right heart. There are sentences that sound insane in hindsight, but dangerous in real time, because the crowd keeps nodding. Denise smiled toward me. "Naomi, sweetheart, come here." The word sweetheart from a woman like Denise always meant a trap had reached maturity. People turned. Kiara stepped forward, holding a black folder. Beside the dessert table stood the notary, clutching her stamp bag and looking increasingly unhappy. Devin went pale enough for me to notice across the lawn. Denise stretched out a hand toward the papers. "We thought it would be beautiful to settle this as a family today, with love all around us. No more tension, no more confusion, just everyone moving forward." And then, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world, "Pass the papers to Naomi. Let her sign first, then we can all celebrate properly." Silence spread in rings. Kiara came closer and held out my father's pen. I still don't know how she got it. Perhaps she had taken it months earlier from the desk drawer and saved it for this performance. Perhaps she thought using his pen would make the manipulation feel sacred. "Just sign the quitclaim," she whispered, smile fixed for the crowd. "Don't make a scene." It is amazing how often the person arranging the scene asks you not to make one. I looked at the folder but did not touch it. "Who drafted this?" I asked. Denise laughed lightly into the microphone. "Oh, Naomi, don't start with your technicalities." Technicalities. Another word selfish people use for consequences. I spoke just loud enough to be heard. A quitclaim deed is not a technicality. The notary shifted. Denise's smile thinned. "It's just a formality, honey. We all know this house should reflect the family properly." There it was, my father's sentence, returned right on time. I took one step forward, not toward the papers, but toward her. "No," I said. "A formality is updating your address. This is a transfer of ownership." Murmurs started around the yard. Kiara leaned closer. "Please don't humiliate Mom." That almost made me laugh, not because humiliation is funny, but because people who build a stage always forget they can end up standing on it alone. I set my tote on the table, opened it, and took out my own envelope. "You're right," I said, looking first at Kiara, then at Denise. "Let's not be unclear in front of witnesses." Denise blinked. I placed the county copies on the table. "Since you've hired a notary and gathered an audience, let's make sure everyone understands what they're looking at." The notary, Marisol, stepped closer and glanced down. Her expression changed immediately from polite confusion to professional alarm. I spoke evenly. This recorded deed added me as joint tenant with rights of survivorship while my father was alive and fully represented. After his death, title vested fully in me by operation of law. The mortgage has since been paid in full. Here is the recorded lien release, which means the document you are asking me to sign today is not a family toast. It is an attempt to pressure me into gifting away my property at an engagement party. Nobody moved. Denise's face lost color first. Kiara recovered faster. That's not what this is. I turned to the guests. Not all of them, just enough. Then what is it? That is the beauty of a clean question. Liars need fog. Clarity starves them. Kiara opened her mouth and shut it. Denise tried again. This is about fairness. Is fairness why you emailed a notary last night saying witnesses would make it smoother? I asked. A cousin inhaled sharply. Devin looked at Kiara in a way that told me this was his first real glimpse of the machinery. Denise's head snapped up. What email? I reached into my tote and held up a printed copy. For the first time, genuine fear crossed Kiara's face. I had not raised my voice once. I did not need to. You invited me to a family party, I said. You arranged a deed. You brought a notary. And you expected public pressure to do what private pressure failed to do. So no, Denise, I'm not signing your document. The silence then was deep enough to hear ice settling in glasses. And because completion had finally arrived, I gave them the different ending. I slid the sealed envelope across the table. Instead, I'm delivering the final occupancy notice and relocation check I already offered. The move-out date remains unchanged. $4,000 is enclosed for transition support. Also enclosed is counsel's letter regarding any further attempts to induce a transfer of title through misrepresentation or coercion. The word coercion landed like dropped silverware. Devin stepped back from Kiara. Marisol, the notary, closed her bag. I'm sorry, she said quietly, more to the yard than to me. I cannot participate in this. She walked out through the side gate. That small exit broke the illusion more effectively than anything else could have. The official neutral person had just voted with her feet. Denise lowered the microphone. Kiara's voice went high. You brought a lawyer letter to my engagement party? You brought a deed, I said. Again, there is power in only saying what happened. Devin looked at Kiara. You told me this was house paperwork everyone agreed on. Kiara's eyes filled instantly, because it should be. And there, at last, was the real creed. Not agreement, entitlement. Guests began doing what guests do when a family myth explodes in public, avoiding eye contact while memorizing everything. Denise straightened her shoulders as if posture alone could restore control. You are a cruel girl, she said, after all I've done for this family. I thought of the appointments, the tax shortage, the funeral balance, the roof, the midnight pharmacy runs, the years of grocery receipts, the vanishing photo, the jokes, the pressure, the careful innocence. Then I thought of my father's voice saying, the problem is not what people would think. The problem is what you would do. So I answered Denise with her oldest weapon turned cleanly around. Family doesn't keep score, I said, but property records do. Nobody laughed. Good, because some lines are not for humor. They are for ending eras. If you've ever had to wait years for one clear moment, the moment the hidden manipulation finally becomes visible to everyone, leave a comment after this story. Those moments cost more than people know, and if you believe quiet boundaries can be more powerful than loud revenge, subscribe. Stories like this are for the ones who learn to stop explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. The party ended without anyone officially ending it. Conversations broke apart. Plates stayed half full. Guests started finding reasons to leave. One aunt hugged me on her way out so tightly it surprised us both. A cousin squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "About time." Devin left alone. Kiara locked herself in the downstairs bathroom for nearly an hour. Denise sat at the patio table staring at the envelope as if it were insolence-made paper. I did not stay to clean. That detail matters because for years I had stayed to clean. The next 3 weeks were ugly, but not in the way people think. There was no screaming match in the yard, no police scene, no shattered dish, just a steady stream of consequences. Kiara's engagement ended 4 days later. Apparently, Devin had serious concerns about trust and conflict style, which was perhaps the most delicate possible way to say he had watched his fiancée try to steal a house with centerpieces nearby and decided he preferred peace. Denise told everyone he was weak. Kiara told everyone he had commitment issues. I told no one anything. The move-out deadline approached, and Denise tried one last pivot. She asked to meet privately. Against my better judgment, I agreed, but only at a coffee shop. She arrived in a soft gray sweater and no lipstick, the visual language of injured sincerity. For the first 10 minutes, she spoke in the register of a woman who had finally become humble. She said grief had distorted things. She said Kiara had pushed too hard. She said the party had gotten misunderstood. She said perhaps we both could have handled matters differently. I waited. Eventually, the real request emerged. What if, she said carefully, we extended the move-out date 6 months, and in that time, we explored whether there's a way Kiara could remain in partial residence, just until she stabilizes. Translation: restore a foothold. No, I said. Her eyes sharpened. You are determined to punish us. No, I said again. I'm determined to complete this. Complete this, she repeated, offended, as if we're a file on your desk. That almost touched something in me because, for a moment, she sounded genuinely wounded. Then I remembered she had brought a notary to a party. You stopped being a household the day you tried to turn my restraint into weakness, I said. I'm not punishing you. I'm refusing to continue subsidizing people who feel entitled to me. She was silent a long time. Then she said very softly, Do you know what your problem is, Naomi? You want to be chosen after you've already been useful. It was one of the cruelest things anyone had ever said to me, which is probably why it set me free. Because the worst part was not that she said it. The worst part was that somewhere inside, I had feared it was true. I sat back and let the sting pass all the way through me. You're right about one thing, I said. I was useful, and you mistook that for permanent access. For the first time in our entire history, Denise had no line ready, no innocence, no quote, no performance, just a woman meeting a closed door. They moved out 2 days before the deadline. Kiara took more than she should have. Linens, kitchen items, my mother's cake stand, a lamp from the den, but I let most of it go. Peace has a price. So does inventory. I chose which one mattered more. What I did not let go unnoticed were documents. Before handing over keys, Denise accidentally left several file folders in the hall closet. Utility bills, old insurance mailers, nothing serious, and tucked between them a draft letter, undated, unsent, but written. It appeared to be the beginning of a complaint meant for an attorney or mediator. In it, Denise described me as controlling, unstable, and exploitative. She wrote that my father had been confused in his final years and that I had isolated him from healthier advice. The interesting part was a paragraph she never intended me to see. Given enough pressure in front of family, Naomi usually gives in because she hates appearing selfish. There it was again, the role, the operating assumption, the family system in one sentence. I added the letter to the firebox. After they left, the house was very quiet, not peaceful at first, just quiet in the way a room is quiet after hospital machinery stops. I stood in the kitchen and looked around. The refrigerator hummed. Sunlight fell across the counter. My mother's missing cake stand was gone, and a cupboard door hung slightly crooked because Kiara never closed anything gently. On the windowsill above the sink, one of my father's old seed packets had somehow survived everything. I cried then, Not because I missed Denise or Kiara, because I was finally alone in a place that had been mine only on paper for too long. The first thing I did was paint the front door navy. The second was restore my mother's hallway wall with the photos I wanted there. One of me at 8 on the porch in rain boots. One of my parents at a county fair. One of my father holding a rake like it was an argument he intended to win. The third was call Aunt Evelyn and ask if she wanted to come for tea. She did. That first Sunday, we sat in the sunroom with chipped mugs and pound cake from the bakery. She looked around slowly, taking in the changed air. "It feels like your mother again," she said. I smiled. That's what I hoped. Aunt Evelyn reached into her purse and set something on the table. It was my mother's cake stand. I found it at Kiara's apartment when I dropped off some mail Denise had rerouted to my house by mistake, she said, as casually as if returning a spoon. I thought it wanted to come home. I laughed so suddenly I startled myself. That winter, I refinished the floors one room at a time. I rented the upstairs bedroom to a travel nurse for 6 months, which helped cover the cost of replacing old windows. I turned my father's den into a small home office and kept one shelf just for the binders, not because I expected another war, but because honoring what saved you matters. Denise tried once to reopen contact. She sent a Christmas card with no apology, just a photo of herself and Kiara in coordinated beige outfits, and the note, "Hope time brings healing." That was her style, always trying to skip repentance and land on reconciliation. I did not respond. Kiara called in February from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. She did not say hello. She said, "Did you really have to embarrass me like that?" It was such a pure question. Not did we do wrong? Not can we talk? Just why weren't you more convenient? "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "I refused you." She scoffed. "Same difference." "No," I said. "Not if you're paying attention." There was breathing on the line, then a brittle laugh. "Mom says you think you won." "That's not it." "What then?" I looked out the window at the fig tree, bare and stubborn against the cold. "I think it ended." She was quiet. For one strange second, I thought maybe I heard something human crack open in her. Not remorse exactly, maybe exhaustion. Then she said, "You always make everything so final." And I understood something then about golden children. People imagine they are loved more. Often they are simply indulged more, which is not the same thing. Indulgence teaches you that other people exist to absorb reality before it reaches you. When they stop, it feels like cruelty. "I hope one day you learn the difference between love and access," I said. She hung up. That was the last direct conversation we had. Months passed, then a year, then 2. My life got smaller at first and better after. That is often how healing works. You lose your audience before you find your peace. I got promoted to portfolio risk manager. The pay bump let me finish the kitchen not as an extraction project, but as a quiet restoration. I did not tear everything out. I kept the old cabinet bones and replaced the doors. I kept the worn oak table and had it refinished instead of buying something trendy. I planted herbs by the back steps. The fig tree never did fruit, but every spring it leafed anyway, which somehow felt instructive. I also started saying no faster in every area of my life. No, I could not take on extra work without a deadline shift. No, I would not host every holiday. No, I did not owe detailed explanations for simple boundaries. No is a house, too, once you learn how to live inside it. The only family relationship that softened was with Aunt Evelyn and, unexpectedly, my cousin Rochelle. She admitted later she had believed parts of Denise's story at first because Denise sounded so fragile when she told it. "You never sounded fragile," Rochelle said. "You sounded composed. I confused that with being less wounded." That is another thing worth remembering. The calm person is not less hurt. She is often just more trained. Rochelle and I became closer after that. She helped me host a small dinner 2 summers later when I invited only people who had shown up cleanly during the hardest season. No performance, no obligation, Just good food, music low in the background, and a table where no one expected me to fund the evening because I was so good at things. At some point during dessert, Rochelle touched the edge of my mother's recovered cake stand and said, "You know what's wild? They thought the house was the story." I smiled because she was right. The house had never been the story. The story was access. Who had it? Who felt entitled to it? Who believed they could turn my reliability into inheritance? Who mistook my fear of conflict for the absence of a limit? The house only revealed all that under better lighting. 3 years after the party, I got a letter from Denise. This one was different. No photo, no holiday gloss, just a folded note in her slanted handwriting. "Naomi, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I am not writing to argue the past. I am writing because I have had time, and time is less flattering than I expected. You were not wrong to do what you did. I still believe some things could have been handled more gently, but I understand now that what we called gentleness often meant your surrender. Kiara is living in Atlanta now. We don't speak as often. Life has a way of arranging mirrors. I don't ask for anything. I only wanted to say I see more now than I did then. Denise." I read it twice. It was not an apology in the full, cleansing sense. There was still self-protection in it, still smoothing, still a reluctance to say plainly, "I tried to corner you for your house. I used family as leverage. I was wrong." But it was the first honest thing she had ever sent me. I did not rush to reply. Limited reconciliation, if it happens at all, should arrive on truth, not nostalgia. A week later, I mailed back a single note. "Denise, thank you for writing. I appreciate the honesty that is there. I wish you well. Naomi." No invitation. No reopening. No pretending. Sometimes peace is not reunion. Sometimes it is a clean distance with no more lies crossing it. That same year, I finally framed my father's one-line statement from the envelope, the one written outside my pen. For Naomi, when "it's just a formality" comes back around. I hung it inside the hall closet where guests would never see it, but I would, every time I reached for a coat in winter, because that was the real inheritance, more than the deed. Not the house, the warning, the recognition. The fact that once, before it was too late, my father saw the system clearly enough to leave me both paper and proof. There are people who hear stories like mine and ask, was the house worth losing family over? I understand the question, but it has the logic backward. I did not lose family over a house. I lost the illusion of family over the truth of what they were willing to do. That truth would have been true in an apartment, in a business, around an insurance check, a caregiver account, a wedding fund, or any other place where access and entitlement met an obedient daughter. The house simply made the betrayal concrete enough that even witnesses couldn't pretend not to see it. And maybe that's why the ending mattered. Not because I won. I didn't walk away feeling triumphant. I walked away feeling accurate. There is a deep relief in accuracy after years of being told your clarity is cruelty. So yes, she wanted my signature on the house at her party. She wanted my old role too. The dependable daughter, the quiet absorber, the woman who would swallow humiliation so everybody else could keep their story tidy. What I gave her instead was a different ending, a documented one, a witnessed one, a final one. These days, when I lock the front door at night, the brass still clicks a little too loudly. The floors still creak near the stair landing. In summer, the hydrangeas lean farther than they should, and every third spring, I still repaint the door navy because some rituals are worth keeping. I host smaller holidays now. I keep fewer keys on my ring. I read everything before I sign it, and I no longer confuse being needed with being loved. That may be the quietest justice of all, because the people closest to you can, in the end, be the greatest strangers.